What happens when you're too country for rock, but too rock and roll for country? It sounds like a musical riddle with no real answer. And for most artists, it's a death sentence, a one-way ticket to obscurity, trapped in a creative no man's land where record labels just don't see the dollar signs. For 13 long years, this was the reality for a band of cousins and brothers from rural Kentucky. They were flat out told their sound had no home. Nashville didn't want their gritty blues-soaked guitars, and the rock world wasn't sure what do with their down-home country storytelling. The industry demanded they change, pick a lane, and just conform. They refused, because one of my viewers, Mikey Mike 8301, left me a comment on my Reverend Horton Heat video, writing, "Where is my Kentucky Headhunters video?" in all caps. Well, here it is. This is the story of how that stubborn refusal, that unwavering belief in a sound nobody seemed to want, led to one of the most unexpected multi-platinum breakthroughs of the era. Before we get started with today's video, if you guys want to support my channel, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And I've been told from a lot of my subscribers that they find themselves unsubscribed from my channel, or they don't see my new videos pop up, so make sure you turn on all notifications. Our story begins in 1968 in the tiny farming town of Edmonton, Kentucky. In a little farmhouse owned by their grandmother, brothers Richard and Fred Young started making a racket with their cousins, Greg Martin and Anthony Kenney. The house, which they simply called the practice house, sat on family land and was surrounded by nothing but pastures, a sanctuary, a place where they could crank their amps to 10 and invent their own world of sound, a world away from the polished trends of mainstream music. They called themselves Itchy Brother, a quirky name snagged from a cartoon character the drummer Fred Young loved. From the jump, their music was a wild yet unclassifiable hybrid. They were soaked in the sounds of their environment, the gospel and blues from the fields, and the powerhouse R&B blasting from Nashville to WLAC radio, but they were also obsessed with the British invasion. Other kids in Kentucky were glued to country radio. The boys of Itchy Brother were studying Cream, Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, and the Beatles. Richard Young later admitted that their dream was to play as part of an English rock band, a goal he jokingly called geographically impossible for a bunch of guys from Kentucky. The result was a sound that was raw, southern, and unapologetically loud. It was a fusion of deep blues, heavy rock, and the kind of storytelling that was baked into the country music all around them. For over a decade, Itchy Brother honed their sound, playing regionally, and they built a small but loyal following. They even cut a single in 1973 called Shotgun Effie, a rowdy tribute to the Young brothers' grandma. They were good, so good that by 1980, they were on the verge of being signed to Swan Song Records, Led Zeppelin's own label. But it wasn't meant to be. The label folded after Led Zeppelin drummer John Bonham died the same year. Like so many bands on the edge of a breakthrough, their timing was just off. Southern rock was fading and the industry was changing. By 1981, after almost 14 years of grinding it out with no record deal, Itchy Brother called it quits. Guitarist Richard Young told the Daily Times Advocate, "We had families, wives, and children and all that, and we just thought we couldn't go on playing original music like that." The members soon went their separate ways, taking what looked like more practical jobs. Richard Young became a songwriter in Nashville for a Cuff Rose Publishing. Fred Young went on the road as a drummer for country star Sylvia, and Greg Martin joined Ronnie McDowell's band. It seemed like the end of the road for Itchy Brother. The dream was over. The next few years were the wilderness years. Richard, now working in the heart of Music City, got a first-hand look at the Nashville machine. He quickly learned that Nashville, as he put it, was really only 3 streets wide. It was a town with a very specific formula in the early 80s. The sound was polished and clean. Artists had to look a certain way and play the game. Itchy Brother had always had the exact opposite of that. They were loud, shaggy, and played a greasy, swampy kind of rock and country that didn't fit into the industry's neat little boxes. During their time as Itchy Brother, they'd talked to several labels from Atlanta all the way to New York, but the feedback was always the same. Too rock for country, too country for rock. Executives couldn't figure out how to sell them. They were a marketing puzzle nobody wanted to solve. Nashville especially was wary. One account noted that they looked like ZZ Top's Outlaw cousins and played with a volume that was completely alien to the polite sounds on country radio. This wasn't just a matter of taste, it was a fundamental misunderstanding of who they were. They were just being true to the music that they'd cooked up back in the practice house. They were a product of all their influences and they just refused to water it down. The message from the industry was crystal clear. Your sound has no home, so either change or give up. and for a while it looked like they'd given up. But that itch to play their own music, it never really went away. It was while playing with Ronnie McDowell, Greg Martin met bassist Doug Phelps. It was in 1985 Phelps and the Young Brothers were playing in a new band. Phelps had a brother named Ricky Lee who had been out of the business for some time. He had previously played in a number of bluegrass bands, and he soon joined the musicians on stage during one gig. When Ricky Lee's powerful country-leaning voice collided with their gritty rock and blues assault, something just clicked. The lineup was different, but it felt right, and Greg Martin soon joined in. Phelps and his brother were born to a preacher father who hated that his kids were into rock and roll. Growing up in Arkansas, Phelps left for Arizona in the 70s, playing in a variety of bluegrass bands as a guitarist. During his time away from the music industry, he worked as a juggler and a magician for children, and even operated his own magic shop, and also served as a museum director for a while. With a lineup now in tow, this new band needed a name. They went by the name The Headhunters. Greg Martin had read a book about how Muddy Waters' band was nicknamed The Headhunters because they could go into any club and chop the head off the house band by just outplaying them. That aggressive take no prisoners vibe felt perfect to them. With a new name and a lineup, they started playing on the radio. They landed a regular gig on a live 90-minute program called The Chitlin Show in Munfordville, Kentucky on local station WLOC-FM. It was a program that featured original blues, rock, jazz, and bluegrass acts. So twice a month, they'd broadcast their raw, high-energy sets all the way from Nashville to Indiana. The show helped them build a real following and helped them tighten their sound. Richard Young told the Edmonton Journal, "It's not like any other radio station you'll see. They'll play Kashmir by Led Zeppelin, followed by Hank Williams, followed by Ted Nugent." The band remarked how they'd even get letters from as far as California from people who had heard their show while driving on the interstate. Along with the radio show, the band also played in 2 local clubs and also played shows in Nashville, something they referred to as commando raids. Richard told the Journal that they wouldn't tell anyone about the Nashville gigs, and when people learned about their upcoming shows, they'd go nuts, and they'd soon be playing gigs to packed venues. They sometimes even waited as much as 6 months between gigs in Nashville to keep people on their toes. To capitalize on this momentum, the band borrowed about $5,000 to record a demo tape, which they completed in just 3 days. The tape included 7 original songs plus a handful of covers, including Bill Monroe's Walk Softly on This Heart of Mine and Don Gibson's Oh Lonesome Me. Unfortunately for the band, the cassette jackets, which were supposed to be printed in black, were actually printed on hot pink paper. The band ended up giving away a bunch of the cassettes for free, but 5 or 6 of them ended up with music publishers in Nashville. Despite not having any sales figures to pitch to the music elites in the city, the band did get a chance to do a showcase for some of the industry bigwigs in Nashville. But that almost ended in near disaster when several of the members showed up minutes before the set time. Most of those in attendance liked the band, but they had no clue how to market them. It wasn't until Harold Shedd, a record producer who was then the head of Mercury Records, came backstage and asked for one of those pink tapes. He signed the band shortly afterwards in December of '88. Shedd was a legendary figure, known for his golden ear and his willingness to bet on artists nobody else would touch. He'd already produced 21 straight #1 hits for Alabama and would go on to sign future giants like Shania Twain and Toby Keith. Shedd was at a showcase to actually see another act, but the Kentucky Headhunters happened to be on the bill. Richard Young recalled that the performance of Bill Monroe's Walk Softly on This Heart of Mine is what sealed the deal. They had taken a sacred bluegrass standard and absolutely supercharged it with a blues rock swagger. It was gutsy and totally original. Shedd saw what no one else in Nashville had. Not a problem, but a one-of-a-kind identity. According to Richard, Shedd called them the next day and said, "We may be cooking hamburgers next year, but I've got to try this." Richard added to the Lexington Herald leader, "Harold could tell we had a sound of our own, but he also knew the best way to get at that sound was to leave us alone. So instead of getting someone to produce their debut album, he let the band produce themselves." The label didn't send the group into a fancy studio. Instead, Shedd made an unheard of move at the time. He took the raw $5,000 demo tape, had it remixed, and released it as their debut album. The title, Pickin on Nashville. It was a perfect, defiant jab from a band that had been the town's outcast for so long. So getting back to the band's name, there was an interview they gave to the Edmonton Journal in 1990 where the members revealed that Herbie Hancock had been using the name Headhunters on an album he put out in 1973, and they asked him if they could use the name for themselves, to which he said yes. So for a period of time in the early days, they were going by the name The Headhunters. Headhunters. But as the members told the Journal, they'd started to wonder if they ended up on the pop charts, which they later did, there could be some confusion about their name. Now, there's another widely reported story that another band already had the name the Headhunters. Regardless, they found themselves sitting in the office of their record label president, who told them they needed a name for their debut album, and he gave them 15 seconds to choose one, and they soon rebranded themselves as the Kentucky Headhunters. Despite being signed to a major label, Polygram had little to no faith that their debut record would be a big seller. Phelps told the Herald Sun that their label didn't really think it was going to sell a lot, so they didn't really put a lot of marketing push behind the album, and the band didn't do a lot of interviews early on. The band also seemed indifferent to whether they fit into a nice musical box or not, despite being signed to a major label. Richard Young told the Herald Sun, "We don't want to alienate one style or another. We just like to play what we play, and hopefully everybody will like it." But critics praised the band's blend of Buddy Holly, Lynyrd Skynyrd, and the Everly Brothers. The band, meanwhile, called their sound Bill Monroe meets Cream or Psychobilly Blues. Released on October 17th, 1989, Pickin on Nashville was a surprise success. It shocked the music world, selling over 2 million copies, and it went on to win a Grammy Award, an American Music Award, and 3 Country Music Awards, including the coveted Album of the Year. Suddenly, the band that couldn't get a deal was the toast of the town. It may surprise you to know that initially country radio stations resisted playing the band's music, but it was country music television that actually helped them early on when they played the video for their cover of Bill Monroe's bluegrass standard Walk Softly on This Heart of Mine. Then, it was only once country music television started playing the band that country stations started playing their music. Once the band's popularity took off, people were scrambling to find a copy of their debut album. Record stores that carried it would only have 2 to 3 copies, so they'd sell out immediately. Once the album and the singles from the record started picking up, the label finally started putting more money behind the album and produced more copies of the record to stock store shelves with. 4 of the songs off the album, including the rollicking Do Miss Walker and their turbocharged cover of Oh Lonesome Me, stormed the Billboard country charts, both becoming top 20 hits. The album produced another hit single with Rock and Roll Angel, which peaked at number 23 on the country chart. Down the Do Miss Walker. The sound that was rejected for over a decade wasn't just accepted, it was a phenomenon. The Outcasts had finally crashed the party. By 1989, a new breed of country stars had taken over radio, the charts, and award shows. So what exactly was the sound that Nashville finally caved to? Billboard magazine called them the Great American Rock and Roll Band, which tells you everything about a group charting on country radio. Their music was a true hybrid, a brilliant mess of honky-tonk, gut bucket blues, and blistering hard rock. One critic nailed it when they said their sound was soaked in Southern rock, like they had gotten drunk with Hank Williams Jr. In fact, Hank Williams Jr. had personally asked the band to open for him on tour, which they did. It was music you could feel in your bones. It was gritty, greasy, and unapologetically alive. As bassist Doug Phelps saw it, he told the Daily News Journal, "We offer a blend of Merle Haggard, Bill Monroe, and Led Zeppelin, with Richard Young adding, basically, we take bluegrass music and make it jazzy." A huge piece of that sound came from their lead guitarist Greg Martin and his 1958 Gibson Les Paul, which became the driving force behind their aggressive style. His playing, anchored by the thunderous rhythm of the Young Brothers, created a foundation that was heavier than anything in the mainstream country charts. Their original songs like Do Miss Walker were little windows into their world. The song wasn't some generic country tune, it was a vivid story about a real guy at a real store who sold them slaw burgers and ski. It felt authentic because it was. At the same time, their choice of covers revealed just how wide their influences were. They didn't see boundaries between genres, they just saw good music. Even with all their success on the country charts, the band never really saw themselves as a country act. Richard Young has always been adamant that they were staunch rockers, more influenced by British bands than by Nashville. Their success was a happy accident, a moment when their unique fusion connected with a massive audience hungry for something real. They hadn't changed to fit Nashville. For a brief moment, Nashville had made room for them. The story of the Kentucky Headhunters is proof that true musical spirit can outlast any trend or obstacle. For over a decade, they were Nashville's outcasts, told their music was a commercial dead end. But they held on to the stubborn belief that the raw, electric fusion of rock, blues, and country they'd cooked up in their grandmother's farmhouse was something special. Their debut album, Pickin on Nashville, wasn't just a record, it was a vindication. It was the sound of misfits crashing the party and taking home the awards. That brings us to the end of today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.